All right, this is the Rise Exchange here on Rise News. As we were just saying, the U.S. Federal Reserve has held rates steady, and according to the press conference, should be beginning any moment from now with U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell. They're indicating there's only one rate cut that will be taking place later this year. We're going to get to that in a moment, but let's get back to matters in Nigeria. Premium motor spirits, could we see a significant drop in its price with the commencement of production from the Dangote petroleum refinery? Some estimates are saying 300 naira per litre is what PMS. I don't know where those estimates are coming from. I'll ask our guest who is joining us, Steve Osho, who is the head of Comerico Partners. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for being with us. Where's 300 naira coming from per litre? Because I'm a little lost. I don't know where people come up with these estimates. I honestly don't.
Yeah, I think the estimate is coming from the people that are actually thinking that by the time we have so much of production from the modular refineries, you're going to see proliferations of that product going to the market, and it will push the price down.
Well, how? This is an international item.
Exactly. So that's like building the castle in the air. Because if you look at all those parameters and those things that actually affect the price of fuel,
right?
You look at the exchange rate, you understand? It's not priced in naira in the international market, it's priced in dollars.
Right.
You understand? So, and the current price, for example, is at, let's even use $80 or $79 per barrel.
Yeah.
And for each barrel of crude, you have about 159 liters. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you multiply 1,400 in the in the exchange rate now, which is dollar, what naira is exchanging for dollar, by that $80 or 79, you arrive at something around 113 or 112 thereabouts. And if you divide that by the number of liters in the barrel, that's about 159.
Yeah.
You arrive roughly around 702 naira.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah.
So which means that I don't understand where these, postulations of around 300 naira, because for me, for that to happen, it means that the exchange rate, naira to dollar, should come to around, maybe around 700 to 600.
Right.
Or the oil price will come down to about $40 per barrel. So I think that's the only way this is actually feasible.
And if oil comes down to 30, 40, you're in trouble because your budget benchmark price is
sure
70-something, right?
You saw what happened during the COVID period,
right,
when we actually saw the price of actually oil, nosedive to about
recession.
Exactly, recession. So, and Nigeria, for example, that actually relies so much in the export of crude.
Right.
Then I think it's no brainer.
What about the impact of the refinery, though? The Dangote refinery, it's pretty massive. It's all sorts of derivatives of crude that are going to be pumped out, diesel, kerosene, all sorts, fertilizers, and so on. Well, how do you see it impacting the nation?
I think it's actually very good for the economy. Number one, I think we have a private investment in oil that is driving that growth. And what it means is that we have a lot of production that is happening locally, which actually impacts on even local refineries. And what happens is that it reduces the number of importation that we have. From CBN statistics that was released a few years ago, I think they said it's costing Nigeria, apart from the freight or plus freight cost, is costing us almost about $25 billion.
Wow.
Within 5 years.
Yeah.
The last statistic release was in 2022. So if you look at that, and if you have that production actually not being, produced locally with the capacity that's being generated from Dangote Refinery, it means that we can now develop local capacity, even from modular refineries and all of that. And that helps the economy globally. Yeah. And apart from that, it creates massive job opportunity for a lot of people in Nigeria. And if you look at some other byproduct that actually can come from oil, refineries, petroleum product, like diesel and all of that. So there's a lot of other allied companies who rely so much on those byproducts. And those byproducts actually can help them, especially for diesel, help them in their production capacity and all of that, and makes them, position themselves for global competitiveness. So I think those are the, few points that when you look at globally or generally, it helps the economy, it helps create jobs locally, it reduces imports, costs and all of that. And at the same time, it helps the investment from the private sector So for me, those are the areas that I look at from the impact of that in the economy.
Thank you. You were talking about crude oil exports and how important they are to the economy. The trade numbers came out. There was all this talk of a surplus. Crude is still dominating the exports in terms of the trade numbers. Are we ever going to get this diversification that we keep talking about in terms of, I guess, diversification of income in particular, since they say the Nigerian economy is already diversified? What do you make of it?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. Diversification is a long process.
Yeah.
Considering the fact that we've actually now have administrations that are very serious about, this diversification of economic income to Nigerian purse. You have a new government that is just taken over last year. I think it's going to take a bit of time. We have to look at that trade numbers. The export is still in crude a lot, apart from liquefied natural gas and maybe sesame seed and maybe urea and a few other products that we're exporting. But the main product that we're still exporting is actually still in crude. And what it means is that for you to get the number ramped up, especially from other, products like sesame seed, urea, some other product, it means that we have to invest in those sectors. So the investment going to that sector is what we need to ramp up for us to actually get those numbers up. The positive side of the story is that we now have trade surplus. We can, attribute that to probably the depreciation of the currency at the same time, because now dollar naira is now exchanged for about 1,004 from the likes of 900 that we used to have. So that contributes to that, but at the same time, the export proceed or export number needs to go up, and it helps us in the economy in a way where we are having or struggling with the foreign portfolio investment or foreign direct investment. If we're able to ramp up in terms of export, it means we can have a lot of proceed coming to the cover of the CBN and to the country through USD. But
then you have to do the oil theft, the aging infrastructure, all those challenges,
So that's part of the investment that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying that apart from the diversification into other sectors that will accrue us some other proceed in USD, we need to make a lot of investment in some of those areas. So in terms of production for crude now, I think we've ramped up a bit from what we used to have in 1,000 or to 1.1 million barrels per day to about 1.5 or 1.6 now. So if we're able to curtail, that shenanigan within that industry to reduce the theft and stealing within that sector, and we're able to invest in the sector, with the PIA bills, what it means is that we attract a lot of investment to that space. And when we have investment going to that space, it means we actually can develop that sector and produce more.
What do you make of this whole talk of whether or not subsidies are still being paid? The gap between diesel and PM. I'm sorry. Okay, fine. I'll skip over that. But okay, what's your long? Because my question was your view on fuel prices long term. And when I thought about that question, I immediately just went to the fact that here in Lagos it's 600 for PMS, but diesel is about 1,003 or 4. So, but yeah, what's your long-term view on where prices will move and what's going to impact it? Avoid fuel subsidies.
Yeah, let me run away from there. I think a lot of things actually going to depend on OPEC and OPEC Plus,
right?
Distribution policy or supply policy. We've seen that most of the time they have announcement on what the quota should be for the members, but most of the members are actually not keeping to that. So that supply dynamics will actually play a role in what happens in the global oil price. Another thing will probably be the Israel-Hamas war, which will cause a bit of volatility in that space. So that and few other, issues that are there. I think for when we saw the Ukraine-Russian war, we saw the volatility that created in the global oil price. So for me, the experts and the consensus has actually been given to be between $70 to $100 per barrel.
Yeah.
Between now and the end of the year.
Okay.
And we've seen that has been hovering around 70, 80, 90, and all of that. So for me, I think we're going to see that. And as long as the global oil price remains at that level, it means that locally, we're still going to see our prices around the same level we're seeing it there.
Thank you. I want to quickly hop out to our neighbors, Ghana, where we've learned mining exports hit $4 billion last year, but inflation in Ghana, month on month, 3.2% last month. I think higher since July last year, although it year on year did decelerate. I think 23.1 from 25. Yes. What's your take on the dynamics over in Ghana? Because the CD looks like it's getting beaten up really bad.
Yeah, I think it's just the same thing that's happening in most of the emerging markets. The same thing in Nigeria, where the currency is actually appreciated massively.
Yeah.
Ghana CD has lost about 14% year to date, and which is actually quite massive.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of the fact that there's been a lot of demand for that, for dollars. And at the same time, the economy actually not been doing great. Revenue, in terms of revenue, the government has not been doing great. And again, I think the overhang on the debt restructure is part of the problem that people are actually playing at. Even though the news just came out today that it looks like they've actually reached an agreement with their creditors. And on the back of that, we're going to see some loans coming from IMF for about $360 million to Ghana government. So I think that's going to play a long role in how the inflation actually play out. You've seen them held rate for the past 2 consecutive MPC meeting, and I think at 29%. So that's going to play out again going forward. I think the base effect for last year was what actually brought it down from 25.8 to about 23.1%. But month to month, on non-food items, is still going up. So those are the things that they need to watch. But I think globally, inflation is being a threat to all the economy. Ghana is not out of the wood yet, but I think the Monetary Authority and the Central Bank of Ghana will need to do a lot to actually tame that.
Speaking of monetary authorities and central banks, just wanted to get your quick take on the breaking news. The monetary authorities and the central bank in the United States, the Fed, holding rates steady. What is it? And also, quickly, just your thoughts on that, I guess. But they said there could be a rate cut later this year, though.
Yes. I think the odd was down from 3 to 2. Now it's down to maybe about 1 rate cut going to happen before the end of the year. I think the Fed is still trying to be very careful. They're still data-driven, and even though ECB has actually cut rates, I don't think they're actually following the same pattern. They're trying to look at the data, look at the job data, and other statistics to see how that will impact. We've seen that the slow growth in the American economy is still there, and inflation is still a bit sticky, even though it's actually dropped slightly from the recent number that they released. But I think the Fed is trying to be very cautious to look at what's going to happen. But before the end of the year, I think we might see just a rate cut.
Mr. Steve Osho at Comerica Partners. It's a pleasure touching on all these global business headlines from Nigeria, US, Ghana. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.